Welcome back to the GCSE Maths Pro YouTube channel. Today's video is on negative indices. This is basically where the power is a negative number. Now this is part one of the higher tier version of indices, okay? So if you're doing foundation, go back and check out the laws of indices videos instead. So as you can see, we've got these three parts. This first video is negative indices. We'll then have a separate video on fractional indices. And then finally, we'll have a video combining both. So let's get right into it. When it says here, we've got find the value of 4 to the power of -1. So the negative power is the -1 basically, isn't it? Now, a lot of people think, oh, well, it's a negative power, so somehow it's going to be like -4, or it's going to make the actual base number a negative. No, the negative power doesn't do that. There's a specific word we need when we're looking at negative indices, and you might not remember exactly what it is. You might feel like it rings a bell, but you're not sure exactly what we mean by this. And the word is the reciprocal. So reciprocal is used in various different parts of maths. The most common one I like to refer to is if you think about how you divide fractions. You might have been shown this acronym in school, which is KFC. So when we're dividing fractions, we keep, we flip, and we change. Now the flip bit is the reciprocal bit. Do you remember when you have the second fraction, you flip it upside down, don't you? I know this is completely irrelevant to the indices at this point, but just to show you, let's say we had 3/4 divided by, I don't know, 2/3, just making this up. Keep the first fraction, flip the second one, that becomes now 3/2, and then you change the symbol. This bit is the reciprocal. The flip is the reciprocal, right? So you can see I had 2/3, now I have 3/2. That is the reciprocal. These are the reciprocal of each other. So basically, reciprocal is just flipping the fraction upside down. Now, obviously you're looking at this and going, well, yeah, but there's no fraction involved here currently. So what do you mean flip it upside down? What am I going to flip upside down? This is where we go, okay, well, 4 is just a whole number, isn't it? It's not currently a fraction, it's a whole number. However, any whole number I can write as a fraction. So 4 as a fraction can be written as 4/1. If you think about it, 4 divided by 1, well, that's still just 4, isn't it? It would still simplify to 4. So that's where the fraction comes from. Technically, this is 4/1. So the reciprocal of 4 is therefore 1/4, or 1/4. I flipped it upside down. So that's where the 1 comes from. You might have been told this. You might not realize where the 1 comes from. You might have been told, oh yeah, just chuck a 1 on top of the 4. But it's because technically 4 as a fraction is 4/1 originally. It's just obviously it's not, we wouldn't normally write this because it's kind of irrelevant information, isn't it? But the reciprocal is therefore 1/4. Okay, so the negative power just means what we say is take the reciprocal, so flip the fraction upside down. Then the actual number, so in this case it is a 1, is just then a normal power. So it's kind of like this. I've got the reciprocal, so I've got rid of the negative part of the power. I still then have to apply the actual number that was in the power. Now in this case, obviously the power of 1, well, yeah, that doesn't change anything, does it? It's still just 1/4, okay? But the point is, if it were 2 or 3 or whatever, you'd have to do it to the power of 2 to the power of 3, whatever. So the main thing is, negative indices, the only thing you need to know is the negative power means take the reciprocal. It means flip the fraction upside down. Then apply whatever number the power is as normal. So let's look at an actual example where I've got a different number. So you can see here I've got find the value of 2 to the power of -2. I always deal with the negative bit first because I just feel like otherwise I probably will forget. You could just deal with the 2 first here if you want, but I'm going to do negative first. So first of all, the negative means reciprocal. So I'm going to flip the 2 upside down. And remember, 2 is a whole number. This 2 here is technically 2/1, isn't it? Same thing. 2 is the same as 2/1. So therefore, the reciprocal is half, 1/2. However, now that's just the negative part. I still have this power of 2 that I haven't applied. So now all I need to do is square a half. Now you might be thinking, what do you mean? Like, obviously this is a non-calculator test. What do you mean square a half? What do you, 0.5, how am I going to square that? Just literally square the numerator and the denominator separately. So for example, 1 squared, well that's obviously just 1. And 2 squared is 4. So actually we've ended up with the same thing as the previous question. Okay, so the negative, I'm going to repeat again, the negative part of the power means take the reciprocal, it means flip the fraction upside down. Then if you have an actual number bigger than 1 in the power, just apply that as a normal power, okay? So you can see the negative power doesn't actually make the answer negative, right? There aren't actually any negatives involved in this case. Okay, so let's have a go at this one. If you already feel like you've got kind of the idea of what's going on, pause the video, give it a go yourself, but otherwise I'm going to go through it again. So find the value of 5 to the power of minus 3. So first of all, minus, the negative. That means reciprocal. Again, we've got a whole number, 5. So I know the reciprocal of 5 is 1/5. Okay? However, I've still then got the power of 3, haven't I? I haven't actually dealt with that yet. So the power of 3 is obviously just cubing it, isn't it? 1 cubed is 1. 1 to the power of anything is still 1, isn't it, basically? And 5 cubed is 125. This is why I do recommend, because as I said, this will likely be the non-calculator paper, that you know, obviously you already know square numbers up to like 12 times 12 and a few beyond that. But I would recommend knowing off by heart the cube numbers from 1 to 5. So what I mean by that is 1 cubed, or you don't need to know that, that's just 1, isn't it? But 2 cubed is 8, 3 cubed is 27, 4 cubed is 64, and finally 5 cubed is 125. You don't need to know beyond that, I wouldn't say. Obviously 10 cubed is technically 1,000, but you probably already know that. I would just know these, be really familiar with these numbers, okay? Especially not just for the negative indices, but when we look at the next video, which is fractional indices, that will be even more important. So I would say just recognize these, okay? Just go, oh, I know that 8 is 2 cubed, or 27, 64, 125. Just recognize those numbers, be really familiar, so that you're not in the exam going, let me just work out what is 5 times 5 and then times 5 again, and you don't need to work it out, you should just know it off by heart. Okay, so that would be helpful. Just these, doesn't even count the first one, does it? But these 4, basically, just learn those off by heart, okay? I'd recommend that. Okay, by now, hopefully you've got the gist of it, so pause the video, give this one a go. We have find the value of 10 to the minus 2. So the first thing is negative means reciprocal. Reciprocal of 10 is 1/10. And then I still need to then apply the power of 2. I still need to square the numerator and the denominator, don't I? So 1 squared is obviously 1, and 10 squared is obviously 100. So 1/100th, that's it. That's literally all it is. Okay, the next one now, we're doing the exact same thing, but we're starting with a fraction. Okay, so whereas before we started with a whole number, now we've got a fraction as the base. So the negative means take the reciprocal, and as we saw in my example at the start, it's just flipping the fraction upside down. So in this case, the reciprocal of 3/2 is 2/3, or 2/3. You just literally flip it, swap the numerator and the denominator. And then you would apply the power as normal. So that's technically to the power of 1. Obviously, I wouldn't need to write that really, because I know that that's still the same thing, isn't it? 2 to the power of 1 is still 2, 3 to the power of 1 is still 3. So your answer here is literally just 2/3. And I would also recognise the word reciprocal, because I have seen in exams they've said write down the reciprocal of something, and so do recognise that word specifically as well. Okay, so we've got another fraction as the base, but now we've got it to the power of minus 2. So find the value of 5/6 to the power of minus 2. So it's just the same repetitive process. The negative part of the power means reciprocal, doesn't it? Take the reciprocal, which means flip the fraction upside down. So the reciprocal of 5/6 is 6/5. And then I still need to apply the power just as normal. So I need to square the 6, which is 36, and the 5, which is 25. So I've got 36/25. Okay, that's literally your answer. Okay, find the value of 1/4 to the power of minus 3. So first of all, the reciprocal of 1/4 is technically 4/1. However, that does simplify to just 4, doesn't it? Don't leave it as 4/1, because obviously dividing by 1 doesn't change anything, does it? So just write it as 4. But then we still have that power of 3, don't we? So 4 cubed, as I said, this is something that hopefully you just know off by heart, is 64. Okay, so this one, it started off as a fraction. However, because it was 1 at the top, when we took the reciprocal, the 1 in the denominator, I say disappears, obviously it doesn't literally disappear, but it doesn't, you can simplify it, can't you? It doesn't need to be there, it's not extra information. So we've ended up with a whole number rather than a fraction. Okay, so the last bit now is we're just going to read the question in kind of a different light. So it says here, write a half in index form. First of all, index is another way of saying, like, indices is just another format. It basically just says, write this as something to the power of something else. So this is kind of like the opposite question of what we've just been looking at. I know that 1/2, if I were to write it as an index, I know this is probably kind of a hard question to start with, but I'll just show you the answer and then hopefully the next few questions you'll get the gist of it. 1/2 can be written in terms of with a power, something to the power, as 2 to the minus 1. So I've done the opposite, haven't I? This is the opposite process of the questions we were just looking at, because I know that 2 can't really be simplified any further. So I know that it is, to the power of 1. However, 1/2 is the reciprocal of 2, isn't it? So I can just write it as 2 to the minus 1. So that is index form. That's what they mean. So let's just check out another question so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Try this one. So write 1/4 in index form. Now there are technically 2 answers to this. Okay, so whether you've got one or the other, it doesn't matter, but if you can think of both, great. The first one, which is similar to the previous one, is obviously 4 to the minus 1, isn't it? It's the reciprocal of 4. The other one, though, is I know that 4 is 2 squared, isn't it? So it's kind of like writing this, isn't it? Because obviously 1 squared at the top makes no difference, still 1, isn't it? And then therefore, I know that 1/2 is the reciprocal of 2, so I can write it as 2 to the minus 2. You've got 2 options there. That one technically has 2 answers. Not saying they'll necessarily ask this, but it's just a good practice to know that not only can I take, the index form and put it into a fraction, but I can also take the fraction and put it back into index form. Especially those of you who, it might be a long time off, but if you are thinking of doing A-level maths, this is just really good practice just to understand that you can do this process in a reversible way, okay? Okay, now we've brought in algebra. Obviously, I know we've been working with numbers because it says find the value, so find the actual number answer. But you can also apply negative indices and reciprocals to algebra, to x. So how do you think you would write 1/x in index form based on the questions we've just looked at? Well, when it's 1/x, obviously x is all to the power of 1 currently, isn't it? That's just the reciprocal of x, isn't it? So I can write it as x to the minus 1. It's the exact same thing as 1/x. Okay, so it can be applied to algebra as well. Okay, this is the final question. Again, this is kind of leading towards those of you who might be thinking of doing A-level maths more so. Based on the fact that if we just skip back quickly, we had 1/x was x to the minus 1. How do you think I would write 2/x? This is quite a tricky question. You might not need it for GCSE, so if you don't really understand this one, don't worry too much. I just really like to add it in there. How do you think we might write it? Pause the video and give it a go. And now let's see the answer. Something that we really need to understand, and not really related to indices or powers, it's actually more fractions. We really need to understand how fractions work, is that the 2 at the top, it's not 1 to the power of something, is it? Because 1 to the power of anything is still 1, so it's not that. I can actually rewrite this as 2 multiplied by 1/x. That's just understanding fractions, because technically 2 is 2/1 as a whole number, isn't it? Let's say I had 2/1 times 1/x. When you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across, don't you? So 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times x is x. So that's how I know I can split it back up into 2 separate fractions. But obviously in this case, I'm not going to write 2/1, purely because 2/1, it just simplifies to 2. Why would I write the 1 bit? It's not additional information, is it? So that's my point, is I can split it like this. So 2 is kind of like the coefficient, isn't it? The coefficient is the number in front of whatever the letter is, x, x squared, y, whatever it is. Then I know that 1/x is just the reciprocal of x. So I know from my previous question I can write the 1/x as x to the minus 1. And the 2 is still just the coefficient. So that's your answer. So that's kind of a more advanced question. As I said, probably not really related to GCSE too much, but if you are looking into doing A-level maths or you just want a deeper understanding of these things, that's a really good question to really understand. Okay, if you made it all the way to the end, then thanks for watching this video. That is everything about negative indices. The next video is fractional indices. Make sure to leave down below any questions you might have. Like the video if you can, subscribe, and check out any other videos we have that might be useful to you.